Hello, dear friends of The Story of Me and You. I'm grateful you're here. Tonight, we begin an 8-part journey that stretches from a noisy modern highway trench to the silent heartbeat of a woman who lived 6,500 years ago. Fasten your imagination. What we found beneath the asphalt might just change the way we look at power, beauty, and memory. A crack in the highway plan. In late summer, construction crews near Oradea, Romania, were racing a deadline. Jackhammers rattled, rebar clanged, and the new access road to the A3 highway looked unstoppable, until one stubborn shovel hit stone, then silence. The foreman frowned, the workers gathered, and in that sudden hush, you could almost hear history breathe. A call nobody expected. This is Gimmis speaking. You found what? Dr. Colin Gimmis, curator at the Tari Chrysler Museum, remembers gripping his phone so tightly it creaked. An unmarked chamber, ornate yet collapsed, had appeared under a meter of clay. Protocol demanded archaeologist, but curiosity demanded something more primal. Awe. First sight of gold lanterns dipped into the pit that evening, and every beam ricocheted off tiny circlets. 1, 2, 20. Soon the count reached 169. Each ring, no bigger than a raindrop, lay threaded like sunbeams through still braided hair. Someone whispered she was loved or feared. The air felt electric, as if the soil itself guarded a secret it wanted to keep. The woman in the earth, beneath the rings, lay the delicate arc of a skull. Teeth intact, copper bracelet coiled at her wrist, 2 humble gold beads at her sternum, and an ocean of mother-of-pearl beads pooled at her hips, 800 in all, shimmering like trapped moonlight. Radiocarbon samples, still warm in evidence bags, promised answers later. For now, imagination painted her as priestess, queen, maybe both. Echoes across time picture the Great Lakes region of the United States. We venerate copper from Isle Royale, hope-filled beadwork of the Mississippian. Now transpose that reverence onto Neolithic Europe, where gold flowed not from bullion, but from belief. 6.5 millennia ago, this woman's community invested wealth, labor, and love into a burial that shouted, "Remember her." A question that won't rest. Who was she, really? A clan matriarch brokering peace, a spiritual medium reading the shape of clouds, or the maker of laws no one dared break? Her silence is immense, yet her jewelry speaks. Of skillful miners, patient smiths, and a society willing to pour prosperity into the grave. That tension between silence and speech will guide our investigation. What lies ahead? Over the next 7 episodes, we will chase isotopes through European labs, translate ancient trade routes, and meet the living descendants, if DNA allows. We'll weigh 169 rings in the palm of one brave conservator and watch a 3D skull rendering bloom on a screen. We will also ask what her story means for little girls in Detroit, teachers in Des Moines, or dreamers in Denver who wonder where dignity begins. Closing beat and bridge. Tonight, we leave you with a single image, lantern light, shimmering on gold, older than the pyramids, held in the calloused hands of a road worker who expected only asphalt. Let that glow follow you into your dreams. Next episode, we trace the gold itself, where it was mined, who hammered it, and how a Stone Age network rivaled the Silk Road in quiet sophistication. Join us. The past is calling. A metal older than memory, gold has no voice, yet it remembers. In a small lab in Bucharest, a strip of it sat beneath microscopes as researchers mapped its microscopic scars, folds, hammer marks, residue of earth from another age. This was no decorative trinket. This gold had traveled, worked, and waited. It was touched by hands who never knew wheels, said metallurgist Dr. Adela Rusu, and yet it was shaped with care beyond words. A map of the unthinkable. Traces of the gold's composition pointed somewhere unexpected, the Balkans, nearly 600 kilometers south. A trail began to emerge, raw ore from what is now Serbia, smelted in primitive furnaces, shaped by unknown artists, and carried by foot across plains, rivers, and perhaps the fear of strangers. The trade no one taught us, we teach kids about the Silk Road, mused Dr. Gimmis, tracing a dotted line across an ancient map. But in this case, we are looking at a trade network that predates it by 4,000 years. In exchange for gold, perhaps obsidian, salt, amber, or ideas. That was the shock. In a world before writing, ideas still traveled farther than swords. The silent caravans. There were no roads, no maps, no passports, just rivers, instincts, and memory. Archaeologists now believe these networks were run not by armies, but by clans, through marriages, alliances, and sacred rituals. Each ring in the woman's grave may have been more than adornment. It could have been a symbol of allegiance, union, or even tribute from distant lands. A society behind the shine. For every ring, there was a miner with dirt-caked nails, a smelter who timed by stars, a walker who risked wolves and strangers. This was not a lone queen. This was a civilization, silent, complex, and lost. You start to realize, said anthropologist Marta Varga, that she didn't wear the wealth. She wore their hopes. A glimmer that connects us somewhere in Kansas or Kentucky. A little girl might braid her hair with beads she saved from birthday gifts. What thread connects her to the braided hair of a woman buried 6.5 millennia ago under a Romanian field? Maybe the same one that ties all of us together, the longing to be remembered, to be seen as beautiful, to matter. Transition to episode 3. In our next episode, we journey deeper, not into the grave, but into the bones. Through DNA and isotope analysis, we begin to answer the question the gold couldn't. Who was she? A daughter? A warrior? A stranger to her own land? Her bones whisper truths even the gold couldn't carry. The lab's quiet gospel. There are no drums in a genetics lab, no flutes, just the hush of filtered air, the gentle hum of machines reading ancient silence. In one such room, in Rotterdam, a sliver of bone, taken from the woman's femur, was slowly unwinding its secrets. Her DNA, brittle with age, still held enough clarity to whisper, I was here. I belonged to someone. And I carried life. Bloodline across millennia. Preliminary analysis stunned even the most seasoned scientist. Her genetic markers aligned closely with those of Neolithic farmers from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. She, or her ancestors, had crossed hundreds of miles, likely over generations, bringing with them not only livestock and crops, but stories, songs, maybe even scars. A stranger in a strange land. Was she born in Romania, or had she arrived there as a girl? Isotope analysis, which traces elements stored in teeth during childhood, gave a curious result. Her early years were spent far south of where she was buried. Her bones were not native to the soil that now held her. A woman between worlds, she was likely a migrant, but not alone. Women in prehistoric Europe often moved between communities through marriage or ritual diplomacy. Perhaps she was a daughter traded for peace, or a wise woman summoned from afar. Either way, her arrival was so significant that, decades later, they buried her in gold. A possible daughter. Even more astonishing, one mitochondrial DNA sample showed a near match with another burial discovered 2 years ago, one of a child. Found roughly 12 miles away, this child was a girl no older than 7, buried without gold, but with her small fingers wrapped around a shell bead. Was it hers, or was it her mother's? The legacy of loss. There are no words to decode grief from 6 millennia ago, but there is pattern. The woman's death followed the girls by some 20 years, long enough to live with the memory, long enough to mourn daily. We'll never know if they were akin, but their bones still echo each other in chemical song. The dignity of knowing. In the end, science didn't give us a name, but it gave us a face. A migrant woman of stature. Possibly a mother, possibly a matriarch, certainly beloved. In her DNA, in the ring-shaped echoes of her world, we glimpse something hauntingly human. The ache to love, the cost of loss, the courage to begin, again far from home. Transition to episode 4. In the next episode, we leave the microscope behind and enter the dirt. We uncover the world she walked in. Her village, the houses, the river that might have carried her reflection. What does it mean to be buried in gold if your neighbors lived in clay? What did her people believe about death, time, and forever? Where the wind remembers south of Biharia, the wheat bends to every breeze. It seems like empty farmland now, but beneath it, patterns emerge, shadows of homes long gone. Archaeologists kneel beside faint circles in the earth where wooden posts once stood, where fire once crackled, and where children once played. This was no forgotten clearing. It was a village, a life of fire and clay. The homes were modest, daub walls, thatched roofs, packed earth floors, yet each one told of care. Hearths were placed with precision. Storage pits lined with woven reeds still held traces of barley, einkorn wheat, lentils. These were people of patience. Their world was fragile, but fiercely intentional. Footsteps she once knew. She walked these lanes, maybe barefoot, maybe with a child on her hip. There is no statue of her here, no carving in stone. But her presence lingers in the way the village was shaped, its symmetry, its flow, The central hearths built not just for heat, but for stories. The sacred within, the soil. In one excavation trench, they found it, a clay altar, smooth with use, blackened by soot. Beside it, a figurine, a woman with outstretched arms, faceless yet full of presence. This wasn't just daily life, it was devotion. Their gods may not have had names, but they had places. Inside every home, every fire, every silence. Not just a queen, but a keeper. The gold in her grave shines louder now. She wasn't buried away from her people, but among them. If she held authority, it wasn't imposed. It was earned. Not by war, but by wisdom. Not by conquest, but by care. In this place of ordinary tools, in humble fire, she was extraordinary. What they believed of death. They buried their dead with purpose. Not beneath, but beside. The ancestors lived among them, not beneath them. Objects in graves were not just offerings. They were messages, tokens, keys. A ring might mean love, or status, or readiness to meet the next world with beauty still intact, a vision of community. To understand her, we must understand them. The weavers, the firekeepers, the potters, the boys who learned from her laughter, the girls who braided their hair like hers. Her village wasn't a backdrop, it was the stage. In her story, it wasn't a solo, it was a harmony. A museum's quiet revolution. In the Turia Chrysarillar Museum, the glass case glows, not with LED lights, but with reverence. Inside, the 169 gold rings, restored and aligned in rows like sunbursts. A few children press their palms to the glass, wide-eyed. Their teacher leans close and says, "She wasn't a queen, like in the movies. She was more. She was one of us." A nation looking backward to move forward. Romania isn't a country that forgets easily. Its land is layered, Roman, Dacian, Byzantine, Ottoman, communist. But the woman in the grave predates all of that. And yet, she now joins the pantheon. Street artists paint her face on old factory walls. Writers imagine her final breath. Little girls name dolls after her. More than an artifact, she represents every woman we never wrote about, said Andreea Kazan, a history teacher from Cluj. Not the queens in castles, but the women who gave birth in dirt floors, who negotiated peace with their eyes, who led not from thrones but from hearths. The echo in modern voices. At a university lecture in Bucharest, a student stood up and asked, "Why did she get gold, while so many women today get silence?" The room fell quiet, and then the professor replied softly, "Because back then, they remembered who gave them life. We forgot. Maybe it's time we remember again." A mirror for the present. Her story is now taught in schools, but more than that, it's questioned. Students ask if she chose her path or had it chosen for her. Feminists debate whether she was powerful or simply sacred. Anthropologists argue not over data, but over meaning. The past doesn't give easy answers. It asks better questions. Legacy isn't marble. It's memory. We often think legacy is for the famous. The statues, the books, the headlines. But this woman had no name carved in stone. What she had was gold in her hair, a village who wept for her, and now, us. We remember her, not because she ruled, but because she lived. Fully, quietly, and deeply. Who else have we forgotten? Her grave asks us not only to remember her, but to look around. How many stories are buried in our cities, in our families, in ourselves? How many women built bridges of peace we never wrote about? How many mothers of civilization were never crowned, but always watching? The child who stared through glass in a school field trip to the museum, a 9-year-old girl named Larissa, stood frozen. She wasn't looking at the gold rings. She was looking at the artist's sketch beside them, the one that imagined the woman with long braids, a steady gaze, and a quiet strength. "She looks like my grandma," Larissa whispered. Memory as education across Romania. Teachers have begun weaving her story into the curriculum, not as a tale of royalty, but as a reminder. History isn't just kings and wars. It's the nameless woman who shaped food, fire, and family. It's the girl who asked questions no textbook could answer, from textbook to bedtime. In some homes, the story lives not on shelves, but in whispers. A mother tells her daughter, "Long ago, there was a woman who wore gold, not because she wanted to shine, but because her people wanted her remembered." A bedtime tale, yes, but also a seed. In the quiet, something grows. Children reimagine her. In a second grade class in Oradea, students were asked to draw someone powerful, Most drew capes, swords, or presidents, but one boy, Mihai, drew a woman holding a bowl and smiling. "That's the gold lady," he said. "She fed everyone." Lessons passed in silence. Not all memory comes through words. In a small village near Biharia, an old woman places a single white bead in her granddaughter's braid every new year. She doesn't say why. But one night, the girl asks, "Did she do this too?" The grandmother only smiles. Mirrors for their own lives. These children may never visit ancient Anatolia or trace the trade routes through Europe, but they learn the most human lesson, that greatness wears many faces. Not always famous, not always loud. Sometimes it looks like your mother. Sometimes like a stranger who lived before wheels. Who keeps the fire? Every society has its keepers of memory. The grandmother who tells stories, the teacher who pauses to ask why, the child who listens with wide eyes. We think we teach children, but maybe they are the ones reminding us to look back, to feel, to carry it forward. Transition to episode 7. In our next episode, we step outside of Romania. From America to Japan, how do other cultures remember their unnamed women? What does it mean to preserve dignity without monuments? What happens when silence becomes sacred, the grave that opened many doors? The woman in Romania wasn't just a discovery, she was a question mark. And around the world, archaeologists, writers, and teachers began answering it in their own tongues. Who was she? In my land? The truth is, every culture has known her, even if they didn't carve her into history books. Japan. The shrine without a statue. In rural Japan, there's a shrine with no idol, just stones polished by weather and prayer. Local women say it's for her, a healer from long ago whose name no one remembers, but whose herbs saved lives. "We don't need a face," says Miko Harada, a 72-year-old caretaker. "We remember how she made us feel safe." Mexico, the woman beneath the mural. In Oaxaca, a mural stretches across a school wall. Women carrying baskets, tending fire, nursing children. But one figure, larger, centered, is unnamed. "That's Mama Tierra," says art teacher Sofia Morales. "She's not a person. She's all the women we forgot to thank." America, a silence on the plains. In the American Midwest, Lakota oral histories speak of a wind mother who guided the tribe before any chief had a name. No carvings, no tomb, just story. "She taught us when to plant, when to run," says Elder Thomas Whitecloud. "She disappeared into the wind, and that was enough." Egypt power in the background. In tombs of pharaohs, archaeologists find women's names chiseled beneath layers of dust. Scribes, stewards, midwives. Not queens, but without them, there would have been no crown. "History loves men with swords," says Egyptologist Rana Eldin, "but civilizations are built by the ones holding children, not weapons." What connects them all? None of these women sought glory. They lived in silence, service, and love. They weren't forgotten because they were unimportant, but because they gave too much of themselves away. That's what makes remembering them an act of justice, not just nostalgia. A growing tradition. Around the world, a quiet movement has begun. Museums adding unnamed women to exhibits. Schools teaching about invisible labor. Artists painting faceless figures onto public walls. A new tradition, where being remembered doesn't mean being famous, but being felt. A place of stillness. It's quiet now. The machinery is gone. The trench is filled. But a single marker remains. Small, respectful, tucked beside a field of waving grain. If you didn't know, you might miss it. But those who do stop, they kneel, they whisper, they leave behind beads, bread, sometimes tears. Not a grave. An invitation to stand here isn't to mourn a stranger, it's to meet her. And through her, to meet ourselves. Every silence holds a choice. Do we look away or look deeper? She gives us that chance, not to rewrite history, but to refeel it. What the grave cannot bury. They buried her body, yes, but not her meaning, not her mystery, not her echo. Her gold has been studied, her bones examined, her home uncovered. Yet what stays with us is not the facts. It's the feeling of awe, of humility, of quiet power, the fire passed on. In the villages nearby, girls still thread white beads into their braids. In museums, people linger longer at her case than any pharaohs. In classrooms, her name, though never known, is spoken with reverence. She is not gone. She's been handed forward, from silence to story, from dust to memory. What we carry. We walk away with no crown, No genealogy, no certainty. But we carry questions. Who around me is giving quietly? Who holds wisdom without shouting? Who deserves to be remembered and isn't? These questions walk with us now. And perhaps they always did. Beyond time 6,500 years ago, someone laid her gently in the ground. They placed gold not to display her glory, but to preserve her memory. Today, we do the same. Though not with gold, but with words, questions, reverence. Not in tombs, but in hearts. The story is now yours. We began this journey with a question: who was she? And we end with a different one. What will we do with what she left us? Let her story be not just told, but used as light, as mirror, as seed, for you, for the ones you raise, for the world you'll leave behind. End of series. Thank you for walking with us, for listening with your heart. The woman in the grave is silent, but you are not. What you remember now is your choice. What you do next is your legacy.